Hi guys, back again, same shirt. No, same day, same shirt. Here's a story. Today what we're gonna do is we're gonna see if we can attach these legs to these shelves. We'll give it a shot. We'll see if we can lay out our angles, cut our miters out, and actually screw in the leg to the shelves and make this into a freestanding table. To do that, what we're gonna have to do before is to mark out exactly where we want this angle cut and what angle we're gonna cut it. If you take a look at this table that was done, you notice that this table has a 45-degree angle between the leg and the shelves. And if you notice, I talked about it before, there's a seamless edge that goes around from the edge of the shelf to the leg, and then it picks up back at the end. And what's cool about this is, if you feel that the leg picks up that 45-degree angle, it doesn't overhang it all, it's not smaller than, it's just one continuous line around the entire project. So that's what we're shooting for. To do that, what I'm gonna have to know is the size of the legs. Not necessarily the thickness or the length, I really need to know the width of this, because I need this 45-degree angle cut to be the exact length as the width of this leg. I know that's a lot of terms to be thinking about, but I need the length of my line that's going to be on my shelf to be the exact width of the leg. So before I do anything, you guys, when you were putting your project together, you figured out the size that this leg was going to be. Most of you gave me a nice round number, like maybe the width is 2 inches wide, maybe it's 1.5 inches wide, maybe it's 2 1/4 inches wide. But a lot of times what I'll do personally is whatever size board we have, I want you to get 4 legs out of the width of one board. So I might have said, well, at 2 1/2, we're only gonna get 3 of them. So maybe I changed it. So what you wanna do before you do anything else is to take a look at the actual leg, the size of the leg. Even though on your bill of materials it might say 2 1/2, I might have told you to move it down to 2 7/16, maybe 2 3/8. So take your actual leg and we're gonna take the width of the leg. I'm gonna measure mine at this time. So I'm gonna take my handy dandy tape measure. Yeah, this is the one that doesn't have the answers, so I have to be smart. Of course, if you want the one with the answers, I think it's the Husky will get you that, and also the DeWalt has the answers. But I'm a pretty smart guy. So I'm gonna take my measurement, and if I'm gonna go from one edge to one edge, I get a measurement of, this looks like to me about 1.5 inches. Not about, pretty accurate at 1.5 inches. So what I need my line to be is 1.5 inches long, going at a 45-degree angle to these shelves. That's a lot to keep in mind. But in my mind, it's actually a pretty easy concept. If you look at your shelves, I asked you to pre-finish these shelves. I said to pre-finish the legs, to pre-finish the shelves. Most people have them stained, most people have them polyurethane so the dado fits in tight. So if you look, if I try to mark on something that's been polyurethaned already, it becomes a difficult task. The way we're gonna do this is we're gonna use our old friend, some masking tape. I'm gonna take a piece of masking tape, I'm gonna put it on the corner of each one of these legs, each one of these shelves at about a 45-degree angle. Remember, the leg is 1.5 inches. So what I wanna do, if I mark this, I'm just gonna put a piece of tape right on the very end of that. Right on the very end of that shelf. It's only 1.5 inches. If my legs happen to be 2 1/2 inches, chances are I would probably put the masking tape away back here. When I mark it, I want to use a pencil. I'm going to mark on this masking tape to give me the exact 1.5 inch length line that I need to represent my angle cut on the shelves. So what I want to do is, the wider the leg, the further back the masking tape's going to go. My tape is only almost close to the very end of this because my legs are only 1.5 inches wide. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do that on each one of my corners. Just take a piece of masking tape. This is the easiest way to do this. And I'll just put this on each one of the corners. I'm gonna also do that on my other shelf as well. The next thing that you might find complicated is we have to mark this out at a 45-degree angle. No, you're not just going to take a pencil and draw a line at a 45-degree angle, what you think is a 45-degree angle. We're going to use a combination square. Everybody knows that the monster square that we have on the right-hand side of the tool cabinet is the carpenter square. The squares that most people are used to using are the tri-squares. And there's a 6-inch tri-square, an 8-inch tri-square, and the 12-inch tri-square. The combination square has the 90-degree angle along with the 45-degree angle. And yes, indeed, it was a question on your midterm exam. So everybody should be aware of what a combination square looks like. This part is critical to us. I'm going to show you a little close-up of this later on when we go to mark this. So let's take a walk back to our shelves here. I said I needed the width of the leg as the length of the line. So if you take a look at this combination square, you're going to notice something about it. If I take the combination square, flip it around this way, the ruler part of the combination square is 12 inches. What I want to do is I want to set the measurement from the intersection of this 45-degree angle, that very point, 1.5 inches down from the top end of this ruler. Which means, if you look at this, what I want to do is I want to go from here to 1.5 inches. If you look, my ruler starts at 12, so I'm going to go down to the 10.5-inch part and put the intersection of the combination square because my line is 1.5 inches long. Something about this combination square that's really, really important. We lose more of these simply because of the fact that people don't know how this works. If I look at this combination square, this little knurled nut can loosen up and I can slide the combination square to whatever measurement I need it to be. There's a groove in this ruler on one side. If you look at that groove, that is critical. Because if this should come off of here, and what normally happens is people do that all the time to use the ruler, now I go to put this back, and every idiot in the world says, how does this go back? The truth of the matter is, if I loosen up this knurled nut, you will notice that in here there's a little tip that has a groove. That groove has to fit the groove that's on the ruler. So to put this back, you simply have to line up the grooves, and this will slide back. If the groove and the the knob on the knurled nut does not line up, it won't go back. So that's an easy way to do it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen this up. I'm going to move this down to 10.5 inches, exactly the point where it intersects. Okay, right there is perfect. Right. Oh boy. Oh, hold on. Yeah. Remember, I said I still thought I was good looking. Oh, it's not even close. Oh my gosh. Oh, these are my bifocals. Yes, indeed. You probably missed that. Right here, I could see that I'm exactly 1.5 inches from here down to where the point goes at 45 degrees. So from here to here is 1.5 inches. If my legs happen to be 3 inches wide, I would move it down to the 9-inch mark, which would happen to be right there. So does everybody understand what I'm talking about? The width of the leg is going to be the length of this line that I set this up to. So I'm going to move this up to 10.5. I'm going to lock the knurled nut in, and I'm all set to mark the 45-degree angle to my shelves. Let's come over here. If you look at the shelves, which are very similar to what you guys cut out, you're going to notice something about this. I always had everyone on here. Look at these crazy kids. Somebody put a screw in the table. Oh boy. Right? Yet another jackass, huh? Well, here we go. I told everybody to round these corners off because if you left this as a sharp corner and someone were to touch this shelf with their hands, of course, that would happen. So we always want to make sure that this is rounded over, but it's going to affect how we put the combination square up against that shelf. If I take this and slide this up, I want the point of the combination square to hit this edge, but the issue is it's rounded over, so I really don't know where this comes in contact with the very edge of this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a piece of scrap wood. I take just a piece of scrap wood and I put it up against here, and when I take the scrap wood and butt the combination square up against here, the combination square will hit the wood that's on the edge that projects out the most. So if you look at that, you'll notice that this is making contact with this. I hold it here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a pencil and I'm going to make this really, really dark. The other thing you could do if you're a teacher is you could use a Sharpie. If I take a Sharpie, I'm just going to do this one time to show you guys how to set this up. I just want to make sure that I don't have to wear my 2 pair of glasses when I'm cutting on the chop saw. So there's my mark at 1.5 inches. I'm going to do the same thing on all of these. I'm going to take this, butt my board up against there, slide the combination square there, and I'm going to put a mark with my pencil. I'll do the same thing over here, and it doesn't matter what corner I use, I just have to butt it up against the piece of wood. Good. Make this really dark. I'll do the same thing on this one. So I'll have my 4 corners all marked out. Oh, by the way, you can't take the board and place the scrap board up against here like this because it doesn't allow the combination square to move all the way up. So I'll slide this up, butts up against there, take my pencil, draw the line. So those are my 4 corners that have to be marked. I'm going to do the same thing on this shelf. And then we're going to take a walk over to the miter saw to cut that at a 45-degree angle. I'm going to carry all of these along with my masking tape and see maybe if I could come up with a better way of doing this. Maybe you guys could help me. Walk this way. No, this way, walk this way. Walk this way. This way. This way. Good. Very good. Good. Very good. Excellent. All right. Here we are at Miter Saw Central. My job now is to accurately cut these 45-degree angles so that that leg is going to fit right on there and it will form that seamless joint from the end, the edge, and across the leg. That's what I want to try to do. I want to try to cut this as accurately as I possibly can, and maybe you guys can help me out with an idea or two. Let's see, I don't think I need my 2nd pair of glasses on.
Do you need a 3rd pair?
No, not a 3rd pair, please. Good one. I introduce you to the miter saw, some people refer to as the chop saw. This is the machine, of course, that replaced our radial arm saw, sometimes for good, sometimes for not so good. The miter saw, of course, is the one that scares most people because when I turn it on, most people go like that. Yes, indeed, it does make a loud noise, but if you get over that, it's really one of the most helpful machines that we have in the shop. The miter saw right now is set at 90 degrees, so if I put any piece of wood up against here, it's going to cut it exactly 90 degrees. But the best part about the miter saw and not the radial arm saw is that I could adjust this at any angle up to about 50 degrees, 50 or 51 degrees. What I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust this to a 45-degree angle. As most people know, when I tell you you can move it in either direction, we can move it either 45 degrees in this direction, 45 degrees in this direction. It really doesn't matter which way you do this. What you always want to do, though, is think when you're cutting, what would be easier and safer for you? I personally like to move the saw at a 45-degree angle to my right. I don't know if it's because I'm right-handed, but it seems like it works out the best. In order to adjust this, there's a black lock on here. The first thing I want to do is I want to lift the lock, and now I'm going to move the saw at a 45-degree angle. What?
We should do some more push-ups.
240 push. That's not, well, there's a smarter way to do this. On the underside of this saw, many people know, there's a spring-loaded clip here. That's the secret. If I take the spring-loaded clip, squeeze it together, now effortlessly I can move this to whatever angle I want it to be. If I take this and you notice, if you hadn't noticed already, there's a stop at exactly 0 degrees or 90 degrees. If I move this over, there's a stop at 15 degrees. There's a stop at 22.5 degrees. There's a stop at 30 degrees. And finally, the stop at 45. Please listen. Oop. You notice that it locks in and it makes a noise. That noise is critical because I could literally move this over past 45, 46, 47, 48. I can move it to those angles because the saw will go all the way up to 51 degrees. So when you do this, please make sure that you hear that lock at 45 degrees, and then I always lock down the black knob. So now this is set at exactly 45 degrees. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my board. I think it's easier to use my Sharpie mark because I can see that a lot better than my pencil mark, but I'm sure you guys wouldn't have a problem with either one. I'm going to take the board, place it up against the fence, and I'm going to cut. Remembering that when I cut, I don't want to cut on the line. As I have always said, you never cut on a line, you always cut to a line. That's your question for today. Do I cut directly on my line at 45 degrees? No, you cut to the line. If you cut to the line, it means that it's still 1.5 inches. What you're literally trying to do is split that pencil line in half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to cut my Sharpie line in half, which would mean I haven't gone past 1.5 inches, but I have come up to 1.5 inches. In order to do this, and I've said this to you guys when you do this, I never like to hold on to the handle if I want to see where the saw blade lines up. The only reason why, or the reason why I don't like to do that is if I bring this down and by some reason I just squeeze my hand together, the switch is located right on the handle. If I do that and I turn that on by accident, that's kind of scary to me. So what I'll always ask you to do is to take your right hand, I hold on to the motor and I bring it down and I'm going to line up the saw blade with the line that has to cut. And if you take a look at this, you'll notice you can see the edge of the saw blade lining up right to my Sharpie line, right to the edge. Right there, that looks pretty accurate. Now I have a question for you, and the question is a very important one. I have to be accurate with 8 of these cuts. In other words, I have to be dead on perfect at that cut, that one, that one, that one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Is there an easier way that I can make a cut so that if I cut one, I can cut them all exactly to that 1.5 inch line? Is there a way that I could do that? And a lot of people will come up with a great idea and they will say to me, yes, Mr. Shimko, you can use a stop. I could take this stop and place it on this fence right here, line it up with the outside cut, and then cut this piece and use that to cut all the other ones. Yes? Well, actually, it's important that you understand something. Number one, if I have a line that's greater than that little 1.5 inches that I have, I really can't because I'm cutting off a section that would go up against that stop. So I'm going to show you an easy way to do this so you can still use a stop and still have it work out. This would be questionable if you have a large line that you have to cut in terms of its length. But what I could do is I could take a piece of scrap wood, hold on to this exactly where I want it to be, take a piece of scrap wood, one that's large enough where I could line it up against the end of my piece and cut. I'm of course gonna clamp it down using a deep throw clamp. So if I take this, line this up, drop the clamp down and tighten it up. Now I have to tighten it up like I do 240 push-ups a day. And this thing won't move now. So when I bring the saw down and cut, it will cut my 1.5 line, and it should cut it on all 4 sides. You want to try it?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, let's do it. I'm going to take my name tag, put it in the back because I know who I am. Sleeves get rolled up, safety glasses on. I'm all set to make my cut. When I do this, as you well know, I'm going to keep my left hand holding the stock up against the fence. My right hand is going to be on the handle. What I'm going to do is bring the saw down, make the cut, and hopefully this will cut my 1.5 inches. And I'm going to shut it off. My question to you is, how did I do? I think I can get closer than that to the line. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen up my stop and just move this in a little bit. This always helps if you're working with somebody, because one person could kind of hold on to your piece and you could kind of slide the stop in a little bit. I'm just going to move this in just a little bit. I'm going to tighten this down a little bit more. I'm going to see where the saw blade lines up. And that looks like it's going to be a little bit better, a little bit closer to my line, and I'm going to make this cut. Hold it down until it comes to a complete stop. If you look now, there's my Sharpie line. So I literally cut that Sharpie line in half. And if I take a measurement from this point to this point, it should come out to be 1.5 inches, which is the same width as my leg. And that's what I'm shooting for. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do all 4 sides here using the stop. And I don't even have to look at my line. So let's give this a shot. So I take my piece, I put it up against the stop again, left hand here, and I'll cut. And if you notice, you could just see the razor thin mark of a line, like I cut that line in half. Now let's cut the other ones.
I think something's wrong.
Yeah, something's really wrong.
Something's missing.
Yeah, something's really missing. Uh-oh. What? Oh. Scratch this video. This is not. What? What? Come closer. What's the problem? This isn't going to work. You see that? What's wrong? Oh, this board is not completely the same length as it is. Oh, it's rectangular. How do I? I take the board and I'm just going to flip it over this way. Check, check, check it out. Check, check, check it out. And this is something that you should keep in mind. If you have a rectangle and not a square, wherever you set the stop up against, you want to make sure that you maintain that. So that does matter. I'm going to finish up these other 4 cuts, and then I'll have 2 shelves that'll be ready to be screwed in. Okay? I want you guys to think when you're doing something, why didn't that work out? Or how can I make that work out? The stop is a great technique, and understanding exactly what you're doing is more important than anything. I hope you guys have a great evening. Stay safe, and I'll be back with you tomorrow.